Ever feel like you're doing this teaching thing alone? You don't have to be. Shared teaching is all about sharing the workload through the power of collaboration and teamwork. Together, we'll walk through all the difficult parts of teaching and learn how to streamline our processes, fine-tune our time management, and develop a more manageable workload. If that sounds like a dream come true to you, then welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Let's share in the teaching to make those dreams a reality. Now here's today's Shared Teaching. Welcome back to the Shared Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Susan, creator behind Shared Teaching, and thank you so much for being here for another Writing Tip Wednesday. For this week's writing tip, we're going to talk about revision. So writing and especially revision is kind of a hard concept for our kiddos to really grasp because for many students, it's this idea of going back to quote unquote fix something that they've already finished, which can be very confusing and even frustrating for them. Because after all, if we know our first and second graders, we know that they feel proud of just completing the piece of writing and they might believe it's perfect already as is. Spelling mistakes, all kinds of stuff, just they love it, right? Because they finished it, they're proud. So teaching them to revise is actually crucial to developing their writing abilities. We really want to teach revision skills early because we want to help students see that writing is a process. It's not just a one and done, like I wrote it, I'm finished, hey, it's published, it's a beautiful piece of writing to send into the world, because that's not reality. And we want to kind of mimic for our students what it's like for professional published authors, because they are authors and we should treat them as such in our classroom because that really builds up their mindset and really helps them feel proud of the work they're doing and sets them up for success in the future when they're in middle school and high school and even college, where they're going to have to revise and edit and draft and revise and write. Like, we want to teach them these skills early on so it's not so painful later in life. So they often learn that revisiting their work is going to allow them to add details, make their stories clearer, and improve their ideas. Revision isn't about finding the mistakes. It's about finding ways to make their thoughts shine even brighter. So I just love that. If you think about it, it's helping their readers enjoy their stories more, and it's helping get those thoughts inside their head more clearer for their audience. So why do we want to teach revision skills to early writers? Well, just like other subjects, we want our students developing their writing muscles. If we need them to improve in math, guess what? They're going to practice addition and subtraction facts. If we want them to get better at reading, they're going to be reading daily. So if we want our students to get better at writing, we need them to write daily. Yes, daily. I know many of us feel like we just don't have enough time in our day and writing gets shoved off to the side because maybe there's not a formal curriculum for it, but it's just as important, if not more so, I'm going to argue, than reading and math, because guess what? In reading and math, you're also using the skills of writing. So it's important. We need to make sure that we're planning some time for them to write daily, even if it's just 20 minutes somewhere, embedded in science or social studies, and of course math, or explaining their thought process of how they're doing this, addition problem, right? So make sure they're practicing daily. I'm going to get off that soapbox and we're going to move right along because this is supposed to be a short writing tip. All right, so while we're not going to have them formally practice revising their skills every single day, it's still a writing muscle that needs to get flexed often in order to improve. So if you're teaching through the writing process, which I really hope you are, because it's what I teach, especially on this podcast, then students are going to be practicing revision each time they publish a piece of writing. So if you're not familiar, the writing process that I teach through my writing units is first plan, where students are using a variety of graphic organizers to plan their writing. Next is write, where they're writing during independent writing time. Then we have revise, where they're rereading their story and they're making their revisions. Then we have edit, where they're focusing on the mechanics of writing. And finally, we have publish, where students finish their story using their best work. Now, as I have explained on other podcast episodes, we are not necessarily doing all 5 steps every single time we go through the writing process, but we might be planning, writing, plan and writing, plan and write, and then we get plan, write, revise, edit, and publish. So every time I publish, I'm trying to make sure they're revising and editing, so they're automatically associating publishing with those 3 actions. Now, if you want to learn more about the writing process, then I have a blog post / podcast episode for you, and it is episode number 70, Teaching the 5-Step Writing Process. So that's going to be in the show notes if you want to go ahead and listen to that later. And let's go ahead and continue on with this show. All right, so last week's blog post and writing tip was adding details to writing. So if you missed that, you want to head back to episode 143, adding details to writing, where you're going to get all the details about how we teach that. But it was all about getting students to improve their writing in response to the add more prompt that we often give them during writing time. When students are adding details, they are learning how to revise their writing without even knowing it. So you're flexing this muscle every time you're telling them to add more, especially if you follow add more with very specific details on how to do it, which of course, if you listen to that podcast episode, you're going to get all the details on it. Again, that was episode number 143. So when it comes to officially teaching revision, it's important to choose our words carefully. Many students have this misconception that revision means to fix their writing, but revision is really a way to improve our writing for our reader. We're not really trying to fix it. Fixing, I like to say, comes during the editing process after we revise. So revision is really a way to improve our writing for our reader. In editing, we're going to look at capitalization, punctuation, fix misspelled words. That's the kind of fixing, right? We're kind of zhuzhing it up for revision, and we're fixing any mistakes during editing. Now, here at Shared Teaching, I am a very big at following a set process. I like to do systems and I like processes. So when I teach writing, it's no different. So of course, I like to follow some kind of process when I'm teaching revision. So when students know what to expect and the process that you're teaching them is repeated often, it's going to become automatic for them, just like their math facts after they're practicing those. Now, while you can teach students to revise using cutesy acronyms such as ARMS, I also like to make sure that they know what it means to revise, because if we don't have that basic understanding of what revision is, it's going to be hard getting the concept across of teaching it when we go through and actually get to the revision process. So to make sure they have an easier time at checking their writing during the revision stage, we need to kind of back up a few steps and make sure that they're crystal clear on what exactly revision is. So for my second graders, I always used a checklist, which is also something that if you purchase my writing units is included in my writing units. And having a checklist for students to follow really takes away a lot of the guessing of what they are looking for. They're not just randomly reading their writing and being like, hey, it looks good to me, but it's a process, right? They're going through each step of that checklist. So the checklist is a concrete list they're going to move through when they check their writing. This is what I mean by my process. My process is I give them a checklist. They know to go through those steps on the checklist. But first, you want to make sure that you are teaching them each step of the checklist one at a time. And of course, you know your students best. If they are struggling to write, you might not want to focus on all the steps of the checklist, but maybe you're just focusing on the very first step, which is adding details. So hopefully you've been doing some mini lessons about ways to add details like we discussed last week. And this way, when you tell your students to check their writing to add details, they're very clear on your expectations. So if you want some more help with that, you're going to want to listen to episode number 52, 3 Steps to Planning Your Writing Mini Lessons. And if you go to my blog, sharedteaching.com, you can always use the search bar, and I have many other episodes and blog posts about mini lessons if you're interested in that topic. So once you've spent a mini lesson on each of the revision checklist steps, you can release the responsibility to your students to go through all the steps on their own. So I like to do the I do, we do, you do model, so they have that gradual release. So you are releasing them to go through the steps on their own. Now, of course, this is going to take some time, and it will likely not be until the end of maybe the second piece of writing that they publish that they kind of are getting this process and it's clicking and making some sense. So if we think of it like math or reading practice, we wouldn't expect them to be proficient after only one practice session. So have some patience and make sure to explicitly model exactly what you are looking for. Happy revising, and stay tuned for an all-new episode on next Wednesday. And then I have a special episode coming up all about dyslexia that you're not going to want to miss. So make sure that you are subscribed to wherever your favorite podcast player is. Mine is currently Spotify. So stay tuned and I will talk to you next time. Bye for now. If you've loved this show, then join me in sharing the teaching,
hitting that subscribe button,
and leaving us a review on
iTunes,
so we can be found by more teachers like you who are ready to start sharing the workload. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Find new episodes each week on sharedteaching.com. Thanks for listening to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Mine currently is Spotify after Apple Podcasts, and I don't know what else, but I was going to go on.